Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
Want awesome health? How about doubling your energy? With our free Awesome Health course, you can get a new video and lesson every single day for 84 straight days. The course covers everything from optimizing your digestion, nutrient intake, correct health issues, including weight, skin, energy, immune system, and so much more. The course could easily be worth $200 or $300 for, and yet it's 100% free when you go to bioptimizer.com. That's bioptimizers.com. Once you're there, just enter your name and email to get the first 3 phases of the Bioptimization report. You'll get the report immediately and begin getting your video lessons each and every day from there on in.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we're going to talk for particularly our female audience about some issues that you might be dealing with. And of course, Matt and I discovered many of the problems that we're going to talk about today a long time ago when we were dealing with women. However, I welcome a women's perspective and an expert on these topics because there's just some things that men don't understand about women, not just the biochemical side, the hormone side, all of those things. But there are elements that are unique to women that you need to understand about the internal dialogue, the emotional state, the commitment to your goals, your objectives, particularly around weight management, digestive health, and of course, the aging process, which frankly is very unkind to women when they hit hormonal dysregulation. With men, it's much easier to manage because of our cycles and much of the data comes from it. But there's an emerging field today that's discussing about the unique needs of females as they go through the various stages of life. And of course, I've been on the sidelines and then integrated a little bit more since my wife is about to have a child and she's in her 40s. And so we've addressed many of these things with functional medicine practitioners so that she can make that transition smoothly and easily, and it's worked out great. But today, we are going to bring in Jessie Hehmeyer, who is, by the way, for those who are listening, she is a physician founder of the Well Empowered, where she practices data-driven, heart-centered functional medicine. She created Well Empowered with one commitment in mind, guiding you in creating the health and vitality that transforms your experience of life and alters what's possible. And I want to start the topic today. We'll get into it. We'll get a little background first, but I'm an all or nothing guy. As it's just my nature and my drive and my determination, and probably a lot of go-getters, entrepreneurial types, people who are, at the top of their field have a lot of this attitude. But the reality is there is a middle road that needs to be embraced, especially if we go through the different phases of life. So Jessie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Wade. It's a pleasure to be here with you and your community.
So let's talk about your work in the field. Where did you get started? How did you get background? And why are women today scrambling for solutions, winding up frustrated, or getting tidbits of information, but they don't really have a quarterback to discern data and information that's relative to them in their journey through life? So how did you get started in this whole field?
Well, for me, I really saw what a huge difference it made in my life when I drew a line in the sand for myself. And in particular, it was around weight and digestion, where I just really got resolved that I was going to figure this out. Right. I was going to figure out how to arrive at a weight where I felt my best, looked my best, and ultimately had access to being my best, because to me, that's what it's all about. And then the same thing with digestion, just kind of handled decades of digestive distress. And when I, solved that for myself, it really got me present to what a gift this work is, and ultimately led me to get a couple of graduate degrees and become an IFM certified practitioner so that I could really dig into the unique physiology, the unique needs of different people, and address the root cause of their own unique health challenges and conundrums in a targeted way rather than throwing darts. And it's such a privilege to do this work with people and to see what becomes possible when, decades of struggles and, shenanigans are in the rear view mirror.
Yeah. Matt and I wrote a book not that long ago called The Ultimate Nutrition Bible, and we created a pyramid of nutritional decisions. And inside of that, we talked about the base of the pyramid is psychological, social, spiritual based factors that often limit or cordon off maybe decisions that you're going to make inside of that. Secondary thing is, I think a lot of people who, you might echo this or challenge us, please feel free to do so. A lot of times people come, they tried a bunch of different things, it didn't work. There may have been some hormonal interactions. For example, things like birth control that a lot of women start on early on in their career, which can be disruptive hormonally. There may have been some adjuncts, some medical conditions that are impacting their metabolism. There may be stress components, and then everything that goes on with aging. There's a lot of different things that make that kind of low resolution information irrelevant to making choices. How do you assess and determine where a woman is when they come into your practice? In other words, like, what are the factors? Like, why do women come up there, and what are the factors that they may not know about that are influencing how effective the strategy they've employed in the past or how effective a strategy might be in the future?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I always want to get very clear on what that person's must-have health outcomes are, because they're going to be different for different people. So starting with that intention, what is their intention for their health in their life? If they're coming to see me, what they're doing isn't working, right? Because they haven't fulfilled their intention. So let's just start with that out of the gate, right?
Yeah.
And then, in conversation, I'm listening for missing puzzle pieces, and those missing puzzle pieces are labs. So I'm going to order labs because labs don't lie. Data doesn't, these numbers don't lie. They help us understand what is at the source of whether it's struggling to lose weight or digestive distress or hormones gone wackadoodle. The labs are an important component to be targeted in how we proceed with nutrition, supplementation, lifestyle, all of the different natural interventions that we're going to bring in to heal the body.
So what are some of the common complaints or challenges that women are having when they come in to see you specifically? Like there's probably like 2 or 3 that are just like, okay,
well,
this
I
is
mean,
a
as you mentioned out of the gate, weight mastery. And I really do like the term weight mastery as opposed to weight loss mastery.
What does that mean to you? What does mastery mean to you?
So mastery means being able to produce an outcome and sustain it over time, right? Knowing what to do, how to do it, and being inspired, intrinsically from the inside to care for your body in a way that allows you to manifest your vision of vitality. So that's what weight mastery means to me.
Okay, so let me give you. Let's dive into that a little bit because my background originally started in the bodybuilding and fitness competitor community, and so that community has mastered weight loss and muscle building. So those are 2 counter evolutionary things that we're dealing with, because adding extra muscle, which has both a longevity benefit and an aesthetic benefit and a metabolic benefit of it, adds maybe 3 aspects, is one thing. Losing body fat, which is obviously a big goal for a lot of people, has been figured out by that community. But I do know at the highest levels, many of the women take, I would say, all in aggressive shortcuts. And the earlier that they do that, like early on. So if a girl is trying to do competitions, let's say in their 20s, and are taking oftentimes advice from men or highly motivated females who are not looking through the lens of, hey, I want to have kids down the road. Hey, I want to make sure that I age gracefully. They're looking at a very short-term window to get an objective and may disrupt their metabolism, their digestive health, all these sort of things that come up. They get the outcome, but the way they got the outcome is not sustainable. So they didn't master that. And I can't tell you how many women I've dealt with personally. In fact, my old coach, Scott Abel, wrote several books on this about the celebrated Instagram model, fitness competitor, high performance female who are adapting many of these technologies and formats, including drug interventions, et cetera, et cetera. And they wind up extremely disappointed. They can't get their weight back in line after the said competition or after a certain age, or they've disrupted their hormonal cycles and they've prevented themselves from having children, because that's an important consideration, especially when women hit their 30s. It becomes a much more prominent projection. Like I can have kids in my 50s, almost no women can. And like this, it's so easy to get caught up in this. Is that part of the issue? Is it part of the issue that they've tried it a short-term approach without that long cast foresight, or is there unique factors disrupting their metabolism just in the world in general?
Both. Yeah, both are true. Both are true. So absolutely, the paradigm we've been handed is a broken paradigm. And it's what I like to call the all or nothing approach, right? And the all or nothing approach is really an expression of self-aggression. And it's lived as overindulgence or deprivation. And so that's when people walk in my virtual front door, they're walking in from that broken paradigm because that's the one they've been handed. And so part of our work is shifting that perspective, right? Shifting it such that that's in the past, and actually the new paradigm they're moving into is one of moving from self-love and authoring their middle ground, that not too tight, not too loose sweet spot where they're able to produce the outcomes they care the most about and sustain them over time. Now, with regards to, are there unique physiological factors? Absolutely. That's why we do labs, or I wouldn't do that, right? So the labs tell us on a real measurable level where are our points of leverage. Not everybody is dealing with the same thing. Your body is different, just like everyone else's, right? So those labs help us understand what is going on. Is there elevated inflammation? Is there a compromised insulin sensitivity? Are there nutrient deficiencies that are interfering with metabolism? Are detox pathways a hot mess? All these things are a variety of different factors that can be interfering with a healthy metabolic rate.
What are you talked about two things. We talked of the kind of internal world and then the externalized data of the internal world. So in other words, you talked about kind of an aggressive nature towards one's internal self, or not understanding that. Can you unpack that a little bit further to explain what you mean by that specifically?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the women listening who have been struggling with their weight for a long time will really relate to this, right? And so self-aggression, as I mentioned, this inherited broken paradigm of all or nothing is one of self-aggression, and it is lived by overindulgence or deprivation. So it's, the deprivation cycle where people are exceedingly restrictive or working out till they're about to pass out, and, they're bringing it all together. Or maybe for some people, it's just simply maybe the whole 30 is a big enough leap for them to have that be an act of self-aggression or deprivation. And the pretty predictable future, at least for the people who I work with who struggled with this area of their lives, is having a compensatory reaction that's overindulgence, right? Instead of having, okay, day 31, whole 30 is over. On day 31, let's eat the pizza and drink a bottle of wine kind of a reaction, right? And so neither one of those, whether it's deprivation or overindulgence, is an expression of self-love. They are both an expression of self-aggression. And it really takes something to shift that, but it's very shiftable. It is absolutely very shiftable. Sometimes it really just begins with someone saying, I am done with this. I am done with these shenanigans. I know there's a different way to proceed, and I'm going to figure it out.
So can you explain to me what self-aggression looks like in its broader sense, other than just the restriction and excessiveness? Is there anything more to self-aggression, and perhaps what are the conditions that lead to that tendency, and why maybe women
self-aggression can manifest in the conversations people have with themselves.
Such
the way
as?
People
like, how would you language that? Like, I'm bad, or I'm good, or I need to do this, or I'm fat, or like, is it, what are those words?
Those things, Wade. Yeah. Everybody's going to have their own unique flavor. Right. But for one person, it might be, I'm a total failure. For someone else, it might be berating themselves and their body when they look in the mirror. Mm-hmm. For someone else, it might be beating themselves into submission as they crank up the pace of their treadmill. Right. So it can show up in many different ways. But I think most listeners will understand, like, oh yeah, I can see when I'm really being aggressive with myself, and kind of tap into where that shows up more commonly for them. It's a big one.
So I want to also look at, what is the incentive or reward for self-aggressive behavior that gets a person to kind of keep doing it? It's like, I went to the gym and I did the hardest spin bike cycle, and there's kind of a euphoria that I've had victory over myself. And
that might be true, but I think there's also a lot of people have this sense that if they're not domineering, like self-domineering, that they just don't know of any other option. It's like, again, it's all or nothing. It's like either the option is domineering and do the thing, or nothing, like sit on the couch and not work out at all.
Okay. Right. Yeah, that's what I wanted to distinguish.
A tool to kind of beat themselves into doing something, rather than, there's zero carrot dangling in that, right? There's no moving towards experience. There's no really being inspired to care for oneself from a place of self-love.
And then, of course, if you're adopting, say, one of those unsustainable models, then at some point, the person then goes, I call it, they get a spiraling down. We put this in the book, a downward spiral of the F-its. F it, I'm going to just go drink this weekend. F it, I'm going on that vacation and dang 10 pounds. Yeah. F it, I'm going to eat the cake and forget about it later. F it, I'm going with the girls. We're going to things. Right. And then that goes on usually for a much more contracted period of time. And then the damage is done. And then it's back to, well, there you go. I knew if you go off on that. So it's like there's like two people inside of there, the carrot and the stick. And then but
I would say there's no carrot. There's only stick. Both of those are stick. Whether it's overindulgence or deprivation, it's all stick.
That's a very unique aspect. So can you describe where the overindulgence is the stick?
Yeah, I mean, the effort kind of approach is like, show me someone who feels really proud of themselves after they've housed a carton of ice cream.
I do know a few of those people. But they're not usually going to the other side of the equation.
Exactly. They're actually not playing the game of elevating their health, right? It's just like not the game they're playing, right? But someone who's actually genuinely committed and struggling to play the game, elevating their health, when that person, finds their spoon hitting the bottom of a pint of ice cream, they're probably not posting it on Instagram, right? They're probably not super proud of themselves.
Right. That's fascinating. So then where does the data come in? Because, we have a saying at Bioptimizers, I think Matt coined it years ago, is like, let's get out of the realm of opinions and theories. His secondary stuff is data shapes destinies. What type of data are you looking for as a practitioner to help balance this suboptimal psychological behavior that leads to improper results or ineffective or unsustainable results?
Well, from the psychological perspective, if I'm just looking at data from the psychological perspective, I'm going to be looking at inflammation. I'm going to be looking at nutrients. I'm going to be looking at blood sugar stability. These are all different things that impact our mood and our psychology. So these are different data points that I'd be looking at for points of leverage to shift that internal milieu, if you will.
Right. What are some of the common threads that you're seeing that people are overlooking and getting the right data? Like, is it hormones? Is it insulin? Is it nutrient deficit? Like what, and then what tests do they
Oh my
they
gosh,
require?
there's so much, Wade. I mean, it's like,
Right.
when someone comes to me and they're like, I just had all of my labs done. I'm like, okay, right. You had a CBC,
Right.
a CMP, and your TSH and cholesterol. Great. I'm glad. Right. It's when I send someone to get their labs done, I let them know, listen, you're going to feel like you're donating blood because we're getting a lot of information, and we're not getting a lot of information because it's cute. We're getting a lot of information because there's no other way for us to know it. And we're getting information that is actionable. So, a comprehensive assessment of the thyroid, of course, right? More than just the TSH, right? Looking at inflammation, looking at a variety of nutrients. These are all different things that are pretty standard, when I'm assessing someone. And absolutely, I might look at the adrenals, or I might look at the microbiome and sex hormones. And, there are a lot of different things we could look at. But to me, I'm always coming in with the question of, what information is going to be most actionable for this person, right? So that question is answered through, a 90-minute conversation. So I spend a lot of time looking to understand where this person is, where they've been, where they're committed to being, their family health history. And it is really like putting together puzzle pieces. And as we put them together, it's like, oh, we're missing that one, and we're missing that one, and we got to do that microbiome test. And, so it really does, it helps us be maybe targeted when gathering information.
This leads to another emerging trend. And I would say that a lot of the medical observational data are really about disease prevention and not, are correlated on, age-old paradigms of, preventing disease. And now, with the medical industry being the third leading cause of death and the aggregate influence of big agri, big pharma, who are not necessarily on the functional side of the equation, and then this emerging paradigm. And I want to be clear to people, and I'm always on this, is we're not here to throw conventional disease prevention modalities under the bus. There's lots of data and lots of information about that. But these cannot inform you about living healthily and maintaining weight and some of these outcomes, because, as we know, the United States spends more money on medicine, the traditional medicine, than any other country in the world. And the more money they spend, the worse the outcomes become. So why is it that someone who has been subjected to their family GP, or maybe referred to a bunch of specialists that are on their insurance program or whatever, are fundamentally going to end up in a bad place if they're using that as their markers? Like, and then how do they make the shift by understanding that you're not practicing woo-woo? Because oftentimes there's criticisms from in that industry of functional medicine, but functional medicine is looking at the body from a different model. Can you disseminate how to make that transition? Because oftentimes people can be skeptical of functional medicine because they've been, literally since they were a child, we're inside this disease prevention model, which is should say disease management model. It's not even really preventative. It's actually, well, we're just going to see that you don't have cancer and heart disease or diabetes. And we're going to put you on some, your psychology is not so good. Let's put you on some SSRIs, and, your sleep's not good. So let's put you on a sleep drug. Oh, you got some pain. We're going to give you some pain medication. It's not like diagnostic of why you got that and how to interrupt that through lifestyle and maybe some augmentation on those lines. It's just like, no, you got this. We're going to give you this. It's, as the New England Journal of Medicine says, we don't cure disease, we treat the symptoms of. And I think so many people don't understand that they're operating from that paradigm, not the paradigm. Can you illustrate what your work is in this emerging new paradigm that's relevant for women, especially because the options for women, career-wise, family-wise, are greater than ever presented before? Most women, like my mom says, when she was 20, she was considered old getting married at 20. Most women today aren't even considering getting married till their late 20s and oftentimes their mid 30s, which closes their window of having children, or also the time frames that they're working with as far as to get their hormones straightened up are much different. It's tougher for women, I would say, because of all the constraints built into the system. Is that something you could speak to?
Yeah, well, a few things that come to mind. One is, how people make their way to a functional medicine approach is varied, but oftentimes one of the reasons people find me is because they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? They have exhausted, they've seen the specialist, they've seen the GP, they've seen the specialist, and they're either made to feel less than for having these symptoms that are unresolved. They don't feel heard, and they still have the symptoms, whatever it is, whether it's around their weight or digestion or hormones. So, kind of arms up in the air, they're looking for another solution, and they discover functional medicine. And really, how we work as functional medicine practitioners is we do work on understanding what is at the root cause of these symptoms and healing the body from that perspective, facilitating the healing of the body, and also acknowledging that the body is working together, systems biology, right? We're not that, as you said, Wade, right? This is not anti-traditional medicine. This is a different way to approach things that, we just want to pull the best of all the toolkits in for the person in front of us. And I'm not interested in excluding any toolkit, but what this toolkit of functional medicine has to offer is really looking at the impact of all these different systems and how they work together rather than putting them in silos, which again has its place. But in the context of this work, that's what we do. I'm also grateful to say that, I have MDs who refer to me. And, what's so fun is when those people who are referred by MDs, they come back to me and they're like, okay, well, guess what? He took me off the metformin because my labs are now so amazing, right? Or they took away my blood pressure medication because I don't need it anymore. My blood pressure is great, right? So it's super rewarding, and it is fun to start to see people getting more curious and a little hint of, collaborating and caring for people. I see a little bit more of that, and that to me is super exciting.
So there's listeners out there that are in that state. They're struggling with their outcome. They've gone through the aggressive internal dialogue over and over and over. They come to you. How do they determine what's a high quality functional medicine doctor that can help them with their specific needs? Like, why would they choose that over, say, their GP or some other specialist?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, you always want to look at what's the right tool for the moment. So if someone shows up my virtual front door and they have acute lower right abdominal pain, I'm going to send them to the ER because they probably have appendicitis, right? So again, it's all about knowing what's right when. But
right.
But if someone has been struggling with their weight or has been struggling with their digestion or their hormones or their energy levels, and they can't find a solution, what I'd encourage them to do is to look for IFM certified practitioners, IFM, Institute of Functional Medicine certified practitioners. We are a body of well-trained practitioners who had to do multiple years of studies and also sat for a couple of different exams in order to, be deemed IFM certified. So I actually now sit on the board of certifying practitioners. So I get to grade incoming IFM applicants, IFM certified practitioner applicants on their case studies, which is super fun. But IFM certified practitioners, you can look that up online. I am one, and there are a lot of other really talented IFM certified practitioners out there as well.
That's super cool. It's so cool to see how this paradigm is emerging. But what are some of the common interactions or things that you're looking for specifically that maybe a GP wouldn't?
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Well, I mean, again, it depends on the problem someone is looking to solve. But to give an example of, someone who is dealing with digestive distress, for example, we might be looking at overall inflammation in the body, which could be affecting digestive motility, either making it too fast or too slow, meaning diarrhea or constipation or bloating or
Right.
a combination,
Thank you.
right?
To
give it in layman's terms.
Let's get some symptoms in here that some people are lost.
And then, with that, we might be doing a really thorough assessment of the microbiome, right? That is not something you're going to be doing at a GP's office. I also lovingly like to call that a 3-day poop test. But, in that 3-day poop test, which, by the way, I just really encourage people not to spend money on the 1 days, because there's a lot of
too much, right?
Yeah. And so it really does. The gold standard for ruling out a parasite is 3 days. So if you suspect you may have a parasite, or you're just not even sure, you definitely want to make sure you're doing a 3-day stool analysis. So, this 3-day stool analysis, we're going to get to learn, typical stool assessments say, is this bug in this sample? Versus the comprehensive microbiome assessments that I do, they say, what's in here? What bacteria are there? What viruses are there? Parasites, fungal infections, all these different things. We're also looking at markers of inflammation. We're looking at your capacity to break down proteins, your capacity to break down fats, your capacity to break down carbohydrates. All of these different things that's among the information we're going to get from a comprehensive microbiome assessment. So that's just one example. When someone is dealing with digestive distress, that is not going to happen at their GP's office.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk hormones. That's a big one. Women's hormones, and of course, men run on a very short window of a 24-hour window, and women run on a menstrual window, of an average of 28 days, standard deviations out from that. How do hormones impact what someone might be feeling or thinking or producing in an outcome?
Oh, I mean, oh gosh, in such a big way, right? Especially if that outcome is getting pregnant, right? You know that.
Right.
But yeah, definitely. Hormones. A commonly overlooked explanation for slow metabolism is actually when detox pathways aren't working well, right? Because one of the things that happens when detoxification pathways aren't running smoothly, whether that's due to too many toxins or just kind of the machinery being a little sluggish, right? We could
Which
say.
is sometimes genetically determined. Like, for example,
Exactly, Wade.
I have suboptimal detoxification pathways. So I
Yes.
actually incorporate, I do fasting once a week. I have biohacking technology like a
Yeah.
HOCAT, which accelerates detoxification. Like I have to, I have some lymphatic devices that move lymphatic system because I know we've had that family
Awesome.
history of that, because that's an area that I notice a big impact for me as a guy. And I think that can be really amplified for females in particular.
Totally, totally. Because I think one of the things, Wade, that a lot of people don't realize, right, when we talk about detoxification, what mostly comes to mind is, pollution and pesticides and, oh my gosh, what was in that soap I used at the restaurant, like that kind of stuff. But we also process our sex hormones through our detox pathways, right? The ones we produce, as well as if anyone's on hormone replacement therapy or on the birth control pill, it all gets funneled through our detox pathways as well. So, if those detox pathways aren't working smoothly, it is going to throw off your hormones, and that can lead to a whole cascade of events, whether it's, painful, awful periods or irritability or challenges getting pregnant or, really severe perimenopausal symptoms. So definitely that those hormones are a biggie. And, again, easy to assess, right? I often reach for a test called the Dutch test. Dutch is a company that has a lot of really great tests. And there are times where I'll do a 1-day assessment. And then there are times where, especially for a cycling female who wants to get pregnant, we'll do a month-long assessment of the hormones to see what's going on and see where our points of leverage are for creating a balanced hormonal, environment.
Yeah, we went through that. It was very interesting because I did all my Dutch panels and they're very simple and easy. And then my wife goes through them and it's like, what? You have to do this for a whole month? And I was like, oh man, and if there is ever an insight about to the variability between males and females, there it was right there, right in my face. Because I've been doing Dutch tests for years.
Yeah.
And then when our functional medical practitioner was working with her, and I'm watching some of the tests that I'm like, oh, look at that. Look at the difference, how much easier it is for me than for her. And of course, I cannot have children. So despite whatever the political statements might say,
right.
Okay, I'm still believing.
Not in the cards.
No, it's not in the cards. So that's one thing. And then of course, you have this, let's talk about the aging perspective and hormonal influence. So, as a male, I'm going to counter. So as a male athlete, guess what? I was very clear about my declining testosterone levels and recovery in athleticism. And the one advantage that athletes have over the general population is that there's not a lot of athletes that peak physically after the age of 28. Like if you look at all of the data, physically, they may be able to sustain high performance depending on how much is based on above the shoulders kind of components. And you can extend career and you can do all this biohacking. There's no athlete, even at the highest levels of that performance, that says, oh, here I am at 40, I'm better than when I was 25. No.
Yeah.
So you discover quickly about the impact of aging lots of times earlier than the general population.
Sure.
Now with females, it's even more amplified, especially because their window to be able to reproduce is significant and their cycle is much more complex. What are some of the things that tend to disrupt women's ability to master their weight from a hormonal perspective, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, as we touched on briefly a moment ago, is those, if those detoxification pathways aren't moving smoothly and their estrogen and estrogens, really multiple estrogens, right, are going to be out of whack, that will impact weight. And, with that, the points of leverage are, the points of leverage are really supporting detox pathways. And I would add to that, to those two ladies who haven't yet completed a Dutch test and are wondering if this is a component for you, one thing you might look at is your digestion, and in particular, your bowel movements. So to answer the question, is there something amiss with my detox pathways? You want to look at how often you have a bowel movement, because that is one of the primary ways we eliminate toxins. And so there's a great saying, I wish I could say I came up with it, I did not, but the saying is, we're not just what we eat, we're what we don't excrete. And that is pointing to the truth that we reabsorb what we're not eliminating, the toxins we're not eliminating. So those estrogens get reabsorbed rather than eliminated if you're not having, ideally, daily bowel movements. So, just one little tip for the people out there who are, kind of scratching your head going, is this at play for me? It doesn't mean that if you're having daily bowel movements that your detox pathways are all spiffy and your hormones aren't out of whack. But it is one tip that would lead you to believe that, okay, there's something to tend to here.
Yeah, that's really insightful. What are some other elements that we'd call the elusive obvious, is a word that we tend to use, is what's the elusive obvious that people might not get in regards to testing and some insights that they might have in order to optimize themselves?
Yeah. So another one that is, I would say two more that are elusive obvious, right? One is, I kind of mentioned it earlier, is elevated inflammation, right? And these are knowable numbers. When I test for inflammation, I'm looking at least at two things, and sometimes more depending on the person, HSCRP and homocysteine. And the reason why these are so important is when inflammation is elevated, your body is going to get pushed into fat storage mode. Right. So it's going to make it really, really difficult to lose weight. And, for me, when I'm doing this lab work on people and I get lab results back, first of all, I'm like a kid before Christmas. Like, I'm so excited to see these results. Right. And when I get a notification they're in, I'm like, yes. Right. So open them up, start to look at it. And oftentimes we'll see that HSCRP elevated. Let's say it's at 5.5, 6.5, something like that. And it's like, ding, 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 ding. That body is not going to let go of a pound until we break that cycle of inflammation, right? And it's pretty predictable. We'll go to work, we'll integrate targeted supplementation, we'll make nutritional shifts, we'll start to, identify the sources of this chronic inflammation. And oftentimes people will feel like for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, they're just treading water. They're like, my gosh, I'm working so hard and nothing's happening. And then invariably, boom, it's like a light switch, right? That you can kind of just tell. I mean, we go back and test the numbers, but when that light switch is shifted, it's like the weight just starts to come off, right? That inflammatory, locked in kind of inflammation situation is no longer true. And the body the metabolism is able to stabilize, to normalize. So that is one obvious overlooked thing. Another thing is suboptimal insulin sensitivity. And that's very different than lab normal, right? Lab normal insulin sensitivity will go up to 20, 21, 22, 23, right? I'm talking 7 or less. That to me is optimal. So if you are above 7 for your fasting insulin, again, simple blood test, you're in the world of suboptimal insulin sensitivity. And what that means is your body's going to be producing more insulin. And while insulin has many, many jobs, one of the things that it does is it is a master regulator of your metabolism. So when you are producing more insulin, your body is getting the message from all that insulin, hold on to that fat, store that fat, do not burn that fat. So that's another very obvious and often overlooked piece, because if people do happen to have their insulin tested, they're like, oh, it's normal, it's 13. It's like, oh my goodness, you are a far cry from optimal at 13. And, also good news, we can go to work on that.
And so inside of some of the things you do, so you're doing dietary stuff, you're doing, gut tests, you're doing hormone stuff. Where does the role of, say, exercise, fitness, and things like that, how does that integrate with that model?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So before I went to graduate school, I opened the first high intensity strength training gym in the city of Chicago in 2002 at 25 with a husband and wife business partner. And I sold my half and went to grad school. It is still there. I actually texted with one of their daughters today. And when I'm back in Chicago, I visit it. So I still go there. But needless to say, movement and exercise is definitely integrated. Now, again, in service of having change be sustainable, I don't throw the kitchen sink at someone right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm,
I think of it like crossing the monkey bars of change. And different people have different arm lengths, right? So the point is, we want to get them on the monkey bars. We want to get them practicing, and we want them to both be well educated on how to care for their amazing body, and also to cultivate a sense of, self-trust and a capacity to sustain the actions they're taking. But absolutely, strength training is, it's metabolic money, right? It's a metabolic money maker, right? If you're not strength training, you are leaving metabolic money on the table, right? Not to mention all the other benefits as it pertains to, bone health and longevity and prevention of injuries. And I mean, we could go on and on and on, right? And then of course, just movement as a whole, whether it's walking or finding some way to get your heart rate up a little bit here and there. I'm someone like you, Wade, who just generally speaking loves moving. So this is not a toughie for me, but I understand that everybody feels the same way. So for those people, we want to come up with, okay, what are the core things we're going to have you focus on honoring on a week-to-week basis, and really, guiding someone to play their best game. Because to me, that's really what it's about. We want you to play your game, and we want you to play your best game. And your best game in this moment may not be your best game in 6 months from now, right? You might just keep, oftentimes as you go on the journey, you look in your rearview mirror and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this.
What are the things that trip people up, either in finding that functional medicine doctor or taking the advice of their functional medicine practitioner?
Yeah. Great question. A few things. So first of all, I would speak to taking the advice, right? When I work with people, I guide them through a process I call authoring your vision of vitality. And this is really giving people the platform for bringing words to the intention for their health in their life. And, for most people, it's like somewhere deep in there, they just have never actually done it yet. And so we do that together. So one is, if people resist this work, right, it's just kind of predictable how it's going to go. And the reason being, Wade, is we don't buy what we do, we buy why we do it. What, the number on the scale, if it were that compelling, people wouldn't struggle with their weight. Guess what? It's not that compelling. Okay, yes, I know people want it and I want people to have it, but it's about a whole lot more than that, right? And so when people are tapped into their why is it so important to you? Okay, well, you can be confident as you move about the world. You see how you interact with people would completely shift. You see how you experience yourself would shift. You see, how you feel getting dressed in the morning would be a completely different experience, right? All of these different things, people start to look at, okay, 5 years from now, if I could just click my heels, how will that future be, right? And so they start to get really clear on that. So that's one, if people resist that work, it's just unlikely that they're going to follow the guidance provided. Another thing is, really forgetting that actions produce outcomes.
Mhm.
right? And so your outcomes are a perfect match for the actions you're taking right now.
Right.
And, I understand a lot of people don't really know what actions are producing the outcomes that they don't like. And that's why they come see us, right? So it really is getting, okay, what actions are required to produce these new outcomes? And then I would say, and realizing that when you produce those outcomes, you need to keep doing those actions to keep those outcomes, right? It's not magic, right?
Right. Yeah. I think that's the whole fallacy of the fad diet strategies that was advocated for most of my fitness career. I've been around a long time. And so, you could see the rise and fall of the back in the day when the Inquirer was out, or, the grapefruit diet, or the Hollywood secret diet, and some radical claim. And then people taking these, I mean, it's just brutal, and people fall trapped to that and wind up in a worse place. Going to that sustainable model, like, okay, there is that transformative period, and that's going to be a period of time, depending on how many elements the person's dealing with. Then they get to, okay, they're at that stage that they want to be at. What are the key elements to maintain those actions? Like, what are the checkpoint Charlies that need to be built in after you've hit there? Because that's really to me, that's the most important game in town.
Right. Yeah. The maintenance.
Because you have a model to move through the different phases and stages of life, because there's going to be disruptive events, birth of a child, a divorce, or changing career, an economic situation, death of a loved one, hormonal shifts as we get over. Like, life is very dynamic. The one thing that we know, it is going to change, and the situation that you're in is going to change, and that's going to put pressure on these elements that you might have figured out. Who are the people, and what are they doing to stay there and keep going and being able to adapt to those changes in the future?
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the work that I do with people is guiding people in creating their own blueprint. And their blueprint is fundamentally, it's like instructions for themselves on how to live aligned with their vision of vitality, right? And so they get clear on, okay, what is my bare minimum, right? Like that I'm going to honor come hell or high water kind of a situation, right? Okay, how many times a week do I promise myself I'm going to strength train? How many, when I'm looking at the amount of vegetables I'm incorporating into my days, what do I see I'm going to honor, like what are my habits, right? So getting really clear on foundational habits, and really, coming up with through our work together, they have come up with strategies well beyond the only, the one tool they've had in the past is willpower, right? Except it's a very delicate tool. It's going to break, right? Sometimes you might need it, but if it's the only tool in the toolkit, like, it's just not going to get the job done, right? So over the course of working together, they're coming up with a lot of different strategies. And one of them is really just being clear and connected to their intention for their health and their life, like from the heart. The other thing that I would say is really developing the capacity to slow down, right? It's we live in a very, very, as you mentioned, dynamic, but also exceedingly fast-paced world. And to make shifts that last, we need to be able to disrupt age-old habits in the moment. And the only way I know to be able to do that is to be able to find pause outside of that moment.
Right.
Right.
Makes sense.
So, finding your own way to slow down.
Words of encouragement to people who might be out there and they're on the fence, they want to take action. What would you suggest to them?
Yeah, well, I would suggest you start where you are, right? It's very easy to get caught up on where you think you should be or where someone else is and you wish you were. But my encouragement is to start where you are and start to actually live a question called, what is my best game right now? What is my best game right now, right? Your best game right now in any given situation, if you're playing that, you're going to get spiral up benefits over time. So in one situation, your best game might be 2 drinks instead of 3 drinks, right? In another situation, your best game might be the salad over the sandwich. a different best game. It might be 6.5 hours of sleep instead of 5. Okay, right. We'd like the 8, but we'll take the better game. In any
Sure.
situation, we'll take the better game.
Where can people find you, hire you, get access to what you're providing in the world?
Yeah, thanks so much. You can find me at wellempowered.com, and feel free to schedule a complimentary consultation to explore working together, or also get on our mailing list. We send out weekly dares that are micro habits, just a super fun way to play the game of elevating your health. You can also follow me on Instagram at wellempowered.
Jessie, this has been informative, fun, exciting. And for all our ladies out there, I hope it was helpful to you. And, I've dealt with female fitness and health and vitality for many, many years. And one of the things that set me apart from other people is I always would go to a functional medicine practitioner so that we could get a profile, so that what I was advocating on the health and fitness side was in alignment with that person's hormones and what's going on in their life. And a lot of the times we ended up working on that psychological relationship as much as the physical stuff. So that self-talk, that voice in your head has got to get in line with the strategies. And I think that's where a professional such as you is very helpful of rewriting a script in a way that's sustainable and that makes you feel good about yourself. Even if you're not at your best, that you feel good enough to keep going forward until you get to your best. And then oftentimes you find out that your best is better than you imagined. And so I really appreciate you taking the time from joining us from across the pond. And I want to encourage all of our listeners to check out Jessie's website. She's offered a free consultation. That's very generous of you. So go in there, grab it, enjoy the journey, and make sure that you're not too aggressive with yourself. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Wade T. Lightheart for Bioptimizers, the Awesome Health Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.